My name is Brandon Hartung, and I'm a media missionary who travels the world using photography and video to tell the stories of impact those missionaries and ministries are having and inviting others to join in those efforts. Today's podcast is sponsored by Oasis Worship Center in Caruthersville, Missouri. Real people serving a real God. You can find Oasis Worship Center on Facebook and Instagram, or they'd love to meet you in person every Sunday morning in Caruthersville, Missouri. In today's podcast, we're joined here in the studio by Missionary Kenton Moody. He's worked all over the world doing disaster relief and response, and now he's been a missionary in El Salvador for more than 10 years. They've planted churches, built houses, a school, medical facilities, the prison ministry with the gang members, all kinds of stuff you wouldn't believe the stories he has to tell. So thanks for joining in, and let's go to the studio. So we're joined today with Missionary Kenton Moody. He's a missionary in El Salvador and done missions work all over the world, though. So we're honored to have you here in the studio and get to chat with you for a little bit.
Well, I'm so grateful, Brandon, and you've been a good friend. And, you know, it's interesting how I got to know you. I saw you on social media, and you were doing things for other people. And I think one time you told me, hey, I'm coming to Honduras. Could I swing over? And it didn't work out for us, but then invited you back for just to come to El Salvador directly. And since that time, we've just stayed friends, and you've been a big blessing to me. Not just the video work you do, because you do excellent work, but more your heart for missions, heart for the world, heart to tell a story. And I really appreciate that about missions media. That, to me, that's the key.
Yeah, absolutely. We'll get to hear some of those stories today, which is great, which is why you're on here. Just tell us about, we're going to get into all the things you guys do. You guys do so many different things that all work together in El Salvador for the people there. And like you said, just the heart of it is where it all starts, like what the purpose behind all of it, obviously pointing people to Jesus. But how did you get involved in missions, like the very first time?
You know, I'm very fortunate to be raised in the church. And so we're Assemblies of God missionaries, but as raised in Assemblies of God church, we went to church every time the door was open. They always had missionaries going through the church. I was always intrigued by the stories and looking at their bric-a-brac or whatever, you know, the things that they would bring, the souvenirs and show and pick them up. And really, I felt a calling as a young child and to ministry and that inclination. We used to have what we call a family altar in our home. And every night my dad would read the Bible, and then we'd all kneel to pray. And it's sort of old school, but that's what we did. And I remember getting up as a little boy, 5 or 6 years old, and raising my hands and putting them over my parents and my brothers. And so that was taking me towards that call. And in a service we had with a missionary evangelist, his name was Lauren Fox, and in the day he was really well known and did many campaigns in Africa and had a tremendous healing ministry. They had a prayer service during the afternoon, and he had service at night. I think it was like a 6-week revival, which you won't find many of those.
But to pull off.
He came, my mom was there with us kids and praying in the afternoon. A number of other people were there, and he walked down the aisle as he was praying, and he just stopped over me, and he just prophesied, and he said, this boy is going to grow up to be somebody who's going to make an impact overseas in missions.
Wow.
And so my mom held that close to her heart. She probably didn't really want to give me to be a missionary, but then at 9 years old, I remember going to a missionary service and a timid sort of country boy and going over behind the upright piano at the end of the service and raising my hand and saying, Lord, I'll go, I'll do, I'll be, I'll say. And that was really my call that God personally spoke to me, and I responded and said yes.
Wow. And then when was the first time you got to leave the country and experience a different culture? And
that was in 1980, and I went on a missions trip from southern Missouri with the youth of southern Missouri, and went to Monterrey, Mexico. And that was my first time to really experience another culture and everything. For me, just to see God moving in another language and another culture was really impactful. I took my second missionary trip as a senior at Evangel then college, now university, and went to the Dominican Republic, and God spoke to me there. And he said, remember the calling that I gave you when you were 9, and this is what I want you to do. I was in my last semester, getting ready for student teaching, a teaching degree, and he said, I want you to be in ministry full time. And so I told my parents when I went back, I said, God's spoken to me. I will finish out my school year. I'm going to do my student teaching and everything, but I really feel God wants me to go into missions. And I graduated in May and started a master's in missions at the Assemblies of God, then graduate school, now seminary in June, and got a missions degree. And so, I mean, that just took me step by step.
And then how did you wind up in El Salvador after all that? There's a lot of countries in the world, right?
There are, and there's sort of a long journey. The Lord took me from Springfield to Oregon to Texas, working in Hispanic churches. I was ordained in the Hispanic district. Why, I don't know, but that's.
Did you already know the language at that point?
I didn't know that well. I could do some of it, but I served as a associate pastor in a Hispanic church. I went from there to be academic dean of Latin American Bible Institute in La Puente, California, and from there as a missionary to Panama. And for my first experience, and there we went to language school and polished up the language that really needed some polishing, and then worked for Convoy of Hope for after being a missionary in Panama. Worked for Convoy of Hope for 12 years, and then as I was part of Convoy of Hope, I served as international director. And over the years, we built many programs, and one of them was a feeding program in El Salvador and in Haiti. And then we started in Nicaragua and other countries as well. And I was there with a pastor group in El Salvador, and we were doing a food distribution. And the Lord just spoke to me as clear as day, and he said, Kenton, if you don't come back to help these youth and these children here in El Salvador, who's going to do it? Wow. I tried to tell the Lord, hey, I'm the international director, I'm going all over the world, I'm doing your work, I'm helping you, and that wasn't the answer he wanted. And the answer really was, if I didn't do it, no one was going to do it. Mm. And sometimes we think, well, if I don't respond, God's got somebody else. He's got a number 2 or number 5 guy he's going to send out. But that's not the case. God wants us to respond and say yes. And so I said yes. I went back and spoke to my boss and resigned my position, and he told me I was crazy. He said, this is our best year ever. You shouldn't be doing that. Take 6 months off, go over there, live over there, get it out of your system, and come back, and let's keep running. And that wasn't what God wanted to hear either. And so I just had to go that direction, and the Lord really helped us, and went to El Salvador in January of 2010. Been there right at 14 years.
Wow. Yeah, I tell people often, like, if you really feel like God is telling you to do something, your response is either yes or disobedience. That's pretty much what it boils down to.
And I mean, that for what you're doing here, because you've worked in the news business, you've used your talents in the secular world, but to do what you're doing, there's a lot of sacrifice at times, and sometimes you sacrifice even friendships or what people think of you because you have to follow God's voice. And I always say God's not looking for talent. God's not looking for abilities. God's looking for a yes. And why am I in El Salvador? Because I said yes. Not because I'm the most talented, because I'm the most capable, or because I speak the language better than anybody else. It's because I was willing to say yes.
Yeah. That's definitely not your zip lining skills, right?
No, but I can take other people up to the zip line.
Yeah, you're working on it. Well, yeah, as long as the ladders hold up.
Yeah.
Depends on where you go. We have a video on YouTube people can watch too of us going on a zip line across a coffee bean field there in El Salvador.
The teams are still doing it. It's a neat place to go.
It really is. When your hand gets hot, it's one of those self-break ones, so your hand gets hot on there.
Sometimes people as well, Brandon, think, well, missions or ministry, it's all mundane or boring, or, it's all church, it's all religion.
No,
but it's not. God allows us to enjoy. Just yesterday, you took us out to the state park, Devil's Den State Park, and we went hiking. We enjoyed nature. We climbed up the mountain, and all of the God wants us to enjoy Him.
Yeah.
And to enjoy our calling. And so if we can go ziplining in El Salvador, I know you don't drink coffee, but drink the good Salvadoran coffee. That's all part of it.
Yeah. And you're building relationships too. So it's like everything you could do in regular life, you're just building relationships and friendships and pointing people to Christ. It's kind of like the old saying, you may be the only book, or you may be the only Bible that some people read,
And really they do, and they read our actions, they read our attitudes, they read our emotions, they read what we do and what we don't do. And boy, that's a heavy responsibility.
For sure, yeah. Yeah. And it's craziest too is like we fail, like I definitely fail. And it's another opportunity, honestly, to point people to Jesus and His grace and love, no matter what you do, how far you gone, all that stuff you hear in church, but it's the truth, He still loves you as one of His kids, that's a cool honor. Like I'm even more overwhelmed by His love whenever I've messed up and like, oh man, I'm not perfect. Of course I'm not perfect, but it's just another opportunity to live it out, I guess.
And probably that's one of the things that's really affected my ministry. I've gone through several tragedies in my life, and so those tragedies really pushed me. I could have hardened my heart, or they pushed me towards compassion and towards trying to understand other people who are going through that. And that has really maybe led to what's been the secret of our ministry, or anything that we do, anything that we have done. It's love behind it. And we love people. I always say love's a four-letter word. Who think of four-letter words as being bad, but love's one of those good four-letter words. Free is another good four-letter word.
Yeah, for sure.
But love is one that people respond to, and they understand. Doesn't have religious vocabulary wrapped around it. It's just God's love, and anybody can give that.
Yeah. It's another saying I've heard is like, you'll never meet somebody that God isn't crazy in love with,
Yeah.
And that kind of changes your perspective. Even if they say they don't love Him or they're not a believer or whatever, they're caught up in stuff. Like God is just wildly crazy about them. And that's something to always remember in our heads, like when you're looking at somebody,
Well, and I know we haven't really got into the ministry, but that's one of the things that's been key to our ministry amongst the gang members and in the prisons in El Salvador is I can go in and I say, God loves you, and I love you too. Because God loves you, I love you.
Mm-hmm.
And if I love you, God certainly loves you. And I mean, you see people with tattoos all over their body. You can look at them and you can see the hurt and the scars. I mean, the mental, the emotional scars in their lives. When you're looking at a gang member, you know that to be in the gang, he's probably had to kill somebody or to abuse somebody sexually because they're always a deal maker that's how you're signing, you're in the gang. And so to look at these guys and they've done horrible things, and yet God loves them anyway. And He sees them as they can be, not as they are. And man, that's a powerful message that we carry, and sometimes we really don't use it to our advantage.
Yeah, for sure. And that's something we are going to get into, but people think El Salvador, of course, it's starting to change a little bit now, but they always think, oh, that's like gang area, Is that ever something that would, I don't want to say fear would try to creep in, but is that something that like a reservation that maybe has come on, like when you started to do ministry there, you're like, oh man, I'm going to be around all these gang members and met possible danger? Like what was kind of your thoughts going into El Salvador with the gang issues, and have you ever had any like run-ins or?
Well, when we first went there, people told me you need to live in a gated community. You don't give your phone number to anybody. You have to be super careful where you go. And I mean, there's a little bit of a fear factor there. And my wife said, well, man, this seems like really heavy. Are we going to be safe? What's going to happen to us? And I just felt a real encouragement from the Lord. I said, if the Lord called us here, then He's going to take care of us. We never lived in a gated community. I've had the same phone number because I use a Salvadoran phone chip before I ever got there. So I've had the same phone number for almost 20 years. I've given it out to everybody, never received a call trying to extort me or trying to do anything. You know, gone everywhere, entered the communities, just gone with boldness, and God's helped us. And I mean, there's always a thought in my mind, what if? And I had two different experiences, three experiences that I'll share with specific gang members. And one of them was when we were building the school. Usually in El Salvador, in the past, the first thing you did when you bought property, you build a wall around it. Second thing, put barbed wire. And the third thing, you buy a big dog and put inside, to keep your property safe. Things are much better now. But we didn't have the money to build a wall around the school. And so we were doing the construction on the building and that type of thing. And a gang member named Nico and his cohorts came in. He was in a wheelchair. He had fallen through a church roof trying to steal the church, and it was crippled for life. But I mean, he had guys that pushed him around. And he told me, hey, Pastor, I need a collaboration from you. And I knew what he meant, but I played dumb, which I'm good at playing dumb. And I said, well, what are you talking about, Nico? And he said, well, I need $300 today from you. And I said, well, I can't do that. It's not my money. He said, well, whose money is it? And I had already determined in my heart I was not going to give anybody any money, because once you're on the take, they're going to be after you again and
Never
again.
stops, yeah.
Never stops, and it goes up. And I said, well, it's not my money, it's God's money. And if you want it, you're going to have to ask him for it, because I'm not going to give you anything. He got really visibly angry with me. And he said, well, I'm just a messenger today, but there's people that are coming after me, because this message comes from the leaders in the prison. They had sent out the message to extort us. And he said, I'm just a messenger. They'll come and they're going to get the money from you. And I told him, I said, it says in Psalms 34 and Psalms 91, and you know that, Nico, because you grew up in church, which you did, says that God puts his angels around those that fear him. And I fear him, and I believe he's going to take care of us. So you tell him to go ahead and come. I'm not paying anything. So this is 11 and a half years later, and no one's ever come. No one's ever extorted. No one's ever broke into the school. No one's ever done anything.
Wow.
And so God kept us safe. The first year of the school, one of the young men came. He was in the sixth grade, and I mean, he was just like white as a sheet. And he said, as I came out of my house this morning, there were gang members, and they shot at me. And so I ran to school, and I'm afraid to go back home. And so I said, well, I'll take you home when you go. And I wasn't really sure what I would come into or confront. But as I took him and we drove, it's like just a block from my house. And as we drove into that community, where I live now anyway, but as we drove into the community, he was in the back of the truck. I had other kids as well I was taking home. And there were 7 gang members there in front of a little mechanic shop, and they started yelling filthy things at him and shouting. And so I rolled the window down, and I said, I'm the pastor of the school. I said, I'd like to come back and talk to you in just a minute if you guys will just wait for me. Yeah, come on back, gringo. We're ready. We're here waiting for you. And I rolled the window up, and I'm thinking to myself, what did I just do? I'm by myself. You can tell I'm a skinny guy. What am I going to do to 7 guys, But I just prayed. I said, Holy Spirit, just guide me. And I dropped them off, and I went back, and sure enough, they were there waiting for me. And I got out of the truck, and I went and I introduced myself to each one. I said, I'm Kenton. What's your name? And they gave me their name, and I said, what grade of school did you go to? One had gone to first grade only, the other 3rd grade, the other 6th, and only one out of the 7 had completed 9 grades. He was there with his daughter. And I said, my goal, I explained my goal to school is to bring education to this area with excellence. And I said, you know what? Your daughter might go to our school next year. And I mean, do you want these kids to end up like you out here in the street yelling at people and that's how you make your living? And they needed education. And by the time we finished, one of the young men said, hey, boss, jefe in Spanish, you know what? We're not going to bother anybody anymore. They can go to school. And it just felt like the Holy Spirit had done that and moved in their hearts.
Yeah.
And we have a whole bunch of students from that area now that go to our school. And then I ended up moving a block away from that area. I mean, some of those guys are my neighbors now. And God just really kept his hand on us. And I have one more, one other thing, because for 8 years as pastor of the church, I had my own bus route. It was my pickup, and I think my record was like 30 people in my pickup in the back and crammed inside and everything.
I did it with you in the truck that one time. So see how people piling in.
Yeah. And, just going down the dirt roads, I thought, man, what if I'm going down one of the roads and, the gang members stop me? What am I going to do? And I don't know, but God's called me to pick up these people and make sure people go to church. And as they're going down a road not too far from my house, where it's at now, a young man stopped, got out in front of the truck and put his hand out. And so I stopped, and he held his phone up and he said, somebody wants to talk to you. And I mean, like that, like 1,000 thoughts run through your mind. What if, what are they going to say? What are they going to do? And as he held it towards me, I saw on the screen, it said grandma, abuela.
Wow.
And I knew as I picked it up, it wasn't his grandma, and it was a gang leader, and that was a code. So if the police got the phone, they would know that it was
whoever he
was. And I said, can I help you? And he said, hey, Pastor, I know that you're building houses in the area, and I just wanted to ask if you could build a house for me and my family, because we're living in a shack, and I would like to provide something for them. And I knew he was a gang leader of the area, and I said, sure, we can. We're helping everybody. It's based on need. It's not based on who you are or whether you come to my church or anything like that. And we ended up building a house. I don't know who it was exactly because he didn't show up, but we built the house, and that building of the home, and just because they saw us in the area, they were familiar with us, opened so many doors. No one ever has tried to come into my property. No one's ever bothered us. Everybody's just has respected us because we're there. And I could tell you story after story, and some of them but we worked in another area, the 18th Street gang area, and it was a former train line. So it was a narrow gauge train, which was only 2 narrow gauge trains in Latin America, one in Argentina and El Salvador, because I think it came from the Brits. And so they have very narrow trail in there. And so to take the wood in, we have to park the truck and unload the wood. And so I asked several gang members to help us unload the wood, and then we ended up building houses for their families. And they got arrested for killing a young lady by burying her alive.
Wow.
And so one of them, his name is Hugo, and Hugo's still in jail to this day. But they had taken him to jail, and Alan, Alan Espinosa, who's one of our associate pastors, he said, I really feel like I need to go to the jail and work with these young people and to see what their situation is. So I said, let's go for it. And so he started visiting and came back. He said, there's a lot of need there. Can you come see what we can do? And so I went with him. Well, they took us to this big cell area. Things have gotten a lot better since then, but they took us to this big area. There's like 150 young men in there, all tattooed and just wearing their underwear, shorts. And they opened the door and said, go on in. And so we went in, and they shut the door behind us, and they stayed out. And so we're just in there with the young men, and they just came up towards us, and like, you could see with their attitude, you're reading in their eyes, well, what do you guys want?
Yeah.
And I didn't know.
It doesn't make sense for you to be.
No, what are you doing?
In a worldly perspective. Yeah.
To be honest, I felt intimidated. And, what do you do? What do you say? Well, here, I'm Pastor Kent, and I came to tell you about Jesus. Well, they didn't ask to be told about Jesus.
Yeah.
Well, out of this group of people comes Hugo. He said, Pastor Kenton, what are you doing here? And I said, well, we came to see you, Hugo, and really not knowing that he was in that particular sector. And he looked around, he said, hey, that's my pastor. And all the guys looked at him, and I was looking at him as well, because I was surprised. He didn't ever come to church or anything like that, but he was calling me his pastor.
Yeah.
And it really clicked with me that I was his pastor because I had gone to where he was, not because he had come to where I was. And really, that's what missions is all about. It's going to where the need's at, not inviting the need to come to where you're at. And so that's been our practice in missions, to go out, and we have a big saying as you come into our campus, our church campus, there it says, come in to worship, go out to serve. And so that's what we do. We go out to serve people.
So when you got there, did you know like how you wanted to start, or did you, how did you like, you just show up? There's so many things, and we'll probably touch on all of them a little bit at least, but I mean, you guys always build a church and have a clinic, and the school is doing amazing, and prison ministry, and all these different things. But when you got there, none of that was there. So like, how do you show up and just be like, all right, God, now what? or like, what was the first like?
Well, and I was the first missionary in a number of years to live outside the capital.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's where you can buy, and that's where your kids can go to school. And so I understand all of that, but we weren't burdened by having kids in school. And so we went out to live in Santa Ana, but I didn't know where I was going to live. I didn't know who I was going to work with. I really didn't know what I was going to do. God had called me to help those young kids and children, wherever that might be, and that I was supposed to go. And so it sounds like a lack of planning, but when you have a 1-year plan, a 5-year plan, and a 10-year plan, there's nothing wrong with that.
Mm-hmm.
But you don't want to take God out of the equation.
Right.
And you don't want to lose that measure of faith. And I simply went by faith that God knew what he was doing, where he was taking me, and what he wanted me to do. And so, there's a little storyline here. I can run through it, and you can interrupt me if you want to. But as I walked out of the plane on, I think it was January 2nd, 2010, as I walked up the plane, there was a banner there, and it said, in Spanish, a roof for my country. And it was a nonprofit of students or young people that built homes for the poor. Mm. And I said, man, I need to get in touch with them. Well, we stayed for a week in another missionary's house, and I looked them up online, and their office was like 3 blocks above where I was staying. So I went up and met with them and said, my goal is to move out to Santa Ana. Would you guys be willing to do? Yeah, you know what? We can work with you. The houses cost, I think it's $1,200 each, and we'll come out and we'll build homes with you. Well, as I went out to Santa Ana, and a couple different places called my attention, I was building homes within a month. And so the Lord started that. I didn't have a whole lot of money, so I'd build one home at a time. They would come out and pay for it, and then we'd do another one, put roofs on plastic shacks, and I was simply looking for a place. The very first month, I was driving along the highway, not far from where we're still at today, and there was what I call a squatter camp. Mm-hmm. And you could tell there's just shacks that put up beside the road. It wasn't their property or anything. And I really felt compelled to stop there. And I've been by several times. What do I do? It was like 5:15 at night, 5:30, and it's starting to get dark. So as I pulled in, and my wife said, don't do this. You don't know how people are going to treat you, what they're going to think of you. And, let's come back during the day and everything. And I said, no, I got to stop. And so I stopped. And as I got out of the truck, somebody came up with an axe handle in their hand, and somebody with a hammer, and another person with a machete. And so they said, what do you want? I said, well, you know what? I'm a missionary, and I'm just interested in helping. Could I come back here, and do you guys need help? They said, well, yeah, but are you going to be like all the rest, just take pictures and never do anything? Oh. And I said, no. I said, I can come on Saturday if you let me. And so we set up a time, and I went back Saturday afternoon, and I took some gifts and stuff out there under a mango tree. We held a short meeting, and I shared Christ and shared what we wanted to do. I wanted to help the community. 7 people accepted the Lord. And so they said, you know what? We'll give you one of these lots. It wasn't theirs to give anyway, but, and I building a tin church that served as a feeding station, and basically worked with the kids because adults weren't really that interested. Mm-hmm. And eventually brought in a lady pastor that started helping with the work, and worked there for 1.5 years. And that's how God led me. And from there, they got thrown off of that property. I went to the next squatter camp over, and they said, well, we need a school. And so I said, well, I have a teaching degree, but I never done a school.
Yeah, school's a big, that's a big
So I said, we'll do something. And I got permission from another Assembly of God school and to use them as a coverage. And we started emergency school and built a building just out of like rough siding and put a thin cover of cement on the floor. And I begged for desks and we put a couple teachers in there and we started a school. And the next year, after like halfway through the year, they threw us off of that property, and God led us to another place and provided the property where our school's at now. During all that time, I was looking around town and I found an area of town where there wasn't a church, and it was in the bar area, the prostitution area. And so I talked to several pastors. I said, you're renting. If you go over here to this side of town, I'll go with you. I'll help you. I'll support you financially. I'll help pay the rent, and let's go and let's plant the church, and maybe God will open up and we can build something. And the pastors I talked to, they didn't want to move. They said, we don't really want to do that. The Lord just spoke to me and said, well, why don't you start the church? Well, I'd never been a senior pastor before. I'd always been like number 2 or number 5 or whatever at the church. And so to go and plant a church, I'm thinking, I got to have the money, because I found a place, though. God provided a place for $500 a month, a coffee warehouse, and we cleaned it out and started from scratch. And the Lord blessed that. And now we're completing 12 years of the church. Here in January, we have about 350 members. God's provided a building. He led us to start the Center of Hope, where we teach gourmet cooking and dessert making and bread making, music and English and taekwondo. And he's led us to start a clinic at the church. We just finished 5 years of having the clinic there. And so God's expanded all of this outreach, and then helped us to build the school in it's about maybe a half a mile from our church, where he gave us some other property. And the school's grown from just being kindergarten through 6th grade, and now we're a kinder 4 through high school. We have right around 400 students there. It's completely transformed the area. Mm-hmm. We have students now that might never even have finished grade school. Now they're planning on going to college, and we have going in college, and people graduated from college that have already graduated from our school. So it's so neat to see what God has done, through this timeline, and how he started with the church, which is really the base of everything you do, and everything comes back to the church. Does everybody come to my church? No, they don't have to. I'm not jealous about that. Let them, just as long as they'll go and they'll help grow their family and in the Word of God and in His values. That's what's most important.
Yeah. And then how did I know you also receive a lot of teams from the States and come work with you and do other things? Like how did all that start? Because did people just start reaching out to you? Or?
Yeah, you know what? We had the first team was already programmed. They came within a month. Actually, they helped us unpack our stuff. They came that first month. It was from James River Assembly up in Ozark, and we went out and we're holding like evangelistic outreaches and giving away food, and so that just the first year I think we might have had 8 or 10 teams that came.
That's really good.
I learned some things because we had a number of like back to back, like 2 months, just team after team after team, and I was burnt out after that. But there was so much going on, and in one of the squatter camps as well, we decided to do Survivor Los Héroes, or the heroes, survivors. And so we actually went out, 2 other guys, Alan and another guy, and I went out and built a plastic shack and stayed there for 3 weeks. And the idea was raising money on Facebook to build homes. And we raised around $40,000. So we were able to build 40 homes there in the community. And but not only that, it helped me identify with the people and what they go through. Yeah. We were there. It rained constantly every day. I remember going out one morning, spending an hour trying to get the firewood going just to make coffee. Yeah. And it helped me understand what they were living and what they were going through. And we generated a lot of interest in building homes, and that almost took over our ministry for a period of time. And I realized I need to back off, because my ministry is not just building homes. My ministry is people, loving people.
Yeah.
And so building homes, and we built more than 550 homes in the last 14 years. It's part of our ministry, but it's not all of our ministry. So
yeah, it's a great thing for teams to be able to do that when they get down. And it takes less than a day, usually for people to be able to do that, and makes a great impact on whatever family you're doing it for. I mean, it's obviously a huge blessing and a life change.
I was sharing when we had breakfast with you and your pastor that we've had a couple ladies in September. They're in their 70s, and they're down on their knees hammering and building the homes, and they really enjoy it. Everybody does. And you don't have to, if you can hammer a nail or learn to hammer a nail, you can help build a house. And God has really used that to open doors. We had, because we have prayer meeting on Monday night at our church, I saw a lady come in with her 2 children, and I think her name is Sandra, and we had built a home for her in September. She came that week, accepted Christ at the church, weeping, and gave her heart to the Lord, and now she's a regular at church. And so God has single mom, and God has really done something in her life. And the house, building the house, was a need she had, but it was a door opener. Because Proverbs 18:16 says the gift opens the door for the giver. And so when we give something, it opens the door to the heart.
Yeah.
And I've done everything, Brandon. I've done seed distribution. I taught people how to grow gardens and vertical gardens, and Coke bottles and water bottles, and we've done tree distributions. The brother of the owner of Salvador City up in Branson, he gave us a grant to buy trees. And so we would buy like 3 or 4 year old trees for $3, and then we would go out in the community, and we would, with the local church, hold the tree distribution. And so I would simply do a simple message. You know what? God wants us to be like the tree. He put his roots down by the river of water. He's a river of water, and you know what? It's going to bring fruit one day. And you too, if you plant yourself beside the river of God, you're going to bring forth fruit one day. Give away the trees, and people accepting Christ, and they're just simple opportunities. We've done the same thing with shoes, with food, with clothing. All of those things are a means of helping people and sharing God's love at the same time, and bringing them some relief.
Yeah. And what's cool too is now that you've been there 12 years, I think you said, right?
14
years.
But who's counting?
Yeah, 12, close, pretty close. You're getting to kind of see the life trajectory change on some of these, especially the kids that would have been in the streets or had no education or building their own little shanty or whatever, are now, like you said, going to college, and you're seeing some of those life changes. And you're really affecting a whole generation of people in El Salvador, which is an amazing feeling to know. It again, it's just, you didn't even know where to start, but the answer was, yes, I'll go and do whatever you lead me to do, whatever it looks like, in so many different facets,
Well, and the Holy Spirit leads us if we're willing to be led. And just several stories that come to mind right off about people. Beatrice is a girl that came to our first school in one of the squatter camps. She lived in the squatter camp. And then when we built the Hosanna School, we had a community next door to the school that people that didn't have any place to go. And so we moved their wooden homes over there, and we had like, I think 35 families living there for a great period of time. We still have about 15 families there. And they moved there, and little by little, as they grew, she went to her school. Hosanna School, graduated. Now she's just graduating from the university, and with a teaching degree, and her goal is to come back and teach at the Hosanna School.
Wow.
And we just married her and her husband, who is also a graduate from our school, in August. And to see, they were there at the Monday night prayer meeting, to see these kids grow up and get their education and have a chance to make it in the world, and see Christ as a means of their help and their strength. And not everybody. I mean, we have people we've lost. You do everything you can, and they choose a different route.
Yeah.
But you see those that do, and that's what the Bible says when it talks about sowing the seed. Some falls on rocky ground, some falls on hard ground. Some of the ground, maybe the gang members rob it, or other people rob it, and then there's some that falls on good ground, and it brings forth seed. Two children that we've helped this year that come to mind right off. One, his name is Angel, and they applied for us to build a house, and his mom, Sonia, is a single mom and has 3 children. So we went to build their home, and Angel was right in there working with us. I mean, he's like maybe 8 years old and just hammering and really going to town. And I asked her, I said, well, would you be willing to send him to our school? And so she said yes, and so we got him in school. He's a little behind, but he's in first grade. Within the first month, I noticed he was in the honor guard carrying the flags and the Bible, and I asked the director, I said, well, I thought the honor guard was for those that are doing really well with their grades. I mean, he's only been in school for a month. She said, this kid's really intelligent. He has really done well doing all of his homework and just has risen right to the top. And he's making almost straight A's in school. And this coming from his dad's in prison, coming from a single mom family, living in a wooden home. And yet God has provided a future for Angel.
He just needed an opportunity.
An opportunity. Yeah. JJ's another one. She's in 6th grade, and they were living in just a plastic shack. They're when they built their wooden home, they had to sort of like get all the rock out of the way so we could actually have a flat place to build it. And we got her in school as well, and she's done so well and just flourished. And that's a neat thing about the school. We didn't really talk about the Hosanna School, but it's a Christian school. Most of the private schools are all in the center of town because they charge $30 to $40 a month for the kids to go there. We charge $4 if they pay that. And so it's a big difference. And we chose an area that had the need so we could reach out to needy children. And, we have Christian teachers. They love the Lord. They love the children. We have Christian administrators. We give breakfast. We give lunch. We help them with uniforms if they need it. We give away backpacks and school supplies. They have devotions when they come in the morning. They sing Christian songs. They memorize Bible verses. You've seen them know more Bible verses than many Christians in our churches do. Mm-hmm. They have chapel every week. We have Bible. We teach them English. We teach them computer from kinder on up. And so it's just really an oasis. And we have a waiting list to get into the school. Even though we have 400 students, have a waiting list. And for me, the school is a great thing. And there's a story behind this, which I got to tell you as well.
Yeah.
But we become the major influence in their lives. They're in our school for 5 hours a day. That's a school day in El Salvador. But for that 5 hours, they're in a Christian environment. They're in people that love them, that care for them. And you can't be in that type of environment without being changed. Now, I got to take you back, long way. When I was in college, I mentioned that, I'd had a call towards ministry. And so I got what they back called the exhorter's license back in those days. It's Christian workers now. And I went ahead and got my minister's license.
That's like the first shelf to get on. Yeah.
And, my parents knew that I wanted to be in ministry. And my mom said, well, son, we've been in the church all of our lives, and we've seen how sometimes, things change and it's hard for the ministers. I just really encourage you to get a degree. And so my parents were wise, and I said, well, okay, I'll get a degree. And I got a degree in education. Well, I never really used that degree, but the Lord knew that somewhere down the line, I was going to start a school, that he had that plan and all of his will for me. And so now having that background as a teacher and my teaching degree, and that also helped me when we applied at the Ministry of Education to start our school, to see somebody that's got a teaching degree that's doing it, they have more confidence. And God knew and influenced my mother to influence me to get that degree, knowing that we would use it at the Hosanna School.
Yeah.
I got so wonderful.
That's even like I used to work for the TV news And at the time when I got the job, I didn't know anything. I definitely didn't know I would be doing media missions work. And it's just funny looking back on it now. It's like God was preparing me, like how to shoot stories and tell, even simple things, hook microphones up and cameras and edit and what a storyline looks like, and just the little things. I did it every day for 4 years. It's like that was my training before I launched out into missions. But whatever, I say it all the time, so I won't go too deep into it. But like whatever God puts in your heart, desires or skills, like He has a purpose and a reason for it.
Well, I really enjoy what we're doing, and very few people, Brandon, get to do what they enjoy doing and get paid for it.
Yeah.
And a missionary salary is sufficient. It's not, we're not getting rich off of it or anything like that. But I mean, it meets our needs, and I get to do what God's called me to do, and that's a wonderful thing. And that's helping people. If God had called me to Tajikistan or Uganda, I love that country just as much as I love El Salvador and the food and, the people and everything. It's not so much about a particular place.
Yeah.
It's more about just being willing to be used by God, and really feel like God's using us. There's some stories that come to mind along the way that are sad stories. And I've worked in a number of communities. Another community I worked in that I don't think you've ever seen is called Los Angeles One. And I helped build a lot of homes. I did a rotary water project there. I brought electricity to the community, and we had our Center of Hope there in that community for a number of years, and tried working with the families, and it was really difficult. One young man, his name is Francisco. We called him Chico. He was just, you could tell he didn't have the capabilities for studies, but he was always hanging around and always wanted to hug and would come to church. And we even baptized him and, accepted Christ. But he was in a family where he wasn't the son of the stepdad that was there, and he was treated horribly, and you could tell he felt unloved. I tried to find somebody that would adopt him, that would take him, because he had so many talents. He loved to work and everything. And but as he got a little bit older, the gangs were reaching out and trying to draw him in, which they do. They look for people that are lonely. They look for people who have no one, and that's the ones they try to draw to him. And they informed me one day that the gang had got him, but the other gang, the opposing gangs, had got him and had just tortured him horribly and killed him. And I look back on it and say, why didn't I do more for Chico? Could I have done something else? Why didn't other people help me do more for him? And I hold those things up because I always want to be sensitive to what God's calling me to do to help children. Right now, we're helping 8 children whose their dads are in prison, their moms are in prison, and live with grandma. Grandma drinks, and we can't give any money for the household because she'll spend it on liquor. They're living in horrible, horrible conditions, parasites, and the kid's sick. There's 2 little twins that are 2 years old that can barely walk and malnourished. And I remember the first time that a teacher from our school, teaches in the public school, she brought them to the feeding program, because we feed the people Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and Sunday. And I was looking at those kids, and they were like just shoveling it into their mouth and not with a spoon or anything. They're using their hands, their fingers. And I mean, you could tell that they were doing it because they were hungry. And so we reached out to them, and they were in prayer meeting with us on Monday night at our church. Raquel, Danielita, and her brothers and sisters, they were sitting right there. They're filthy. They have lice. They have sickness. They're wild because they have no discipline at home. And yet, you know what? We love them. And I'll be a little bit emotional. I can't talk about it without that I was playing the piano Monday night for prayer meeting, and I looked down, and there's my wife Eunice on the front row, and Raquel's on one side, and looking up at her, and Daniela's on the other side, and Daniela's looking up, and my wife has her hands raised and praising the Lord, and Daniela's raising her hand and praising God. And you just feel that that's what it's about.
Yeah.
If I can make a difference, if I can sow into Daniela's life and Raquel's life and their family, and yes, we rebuilt a house, we gave them a roof, we've supplied them with food, but that's not enough. We have to show them who Christ is and what real love is. And we've actually met their moms in prison, and their moms have tattoos all over their body, and you can tell that they've been involved in the gangs and that type of thing. But you know what? We told them, we're taking care of your kids. You can trust us because we're there for them. Mm-hmm. And I don't want to ever look at like numbers. I want to help 10,000 people. Really, I want to help Raquel. I want to help Daniela. I want to help a Chico. I want to help an Angel. I want to help a JJ. That has to be focused on specific people.
Yeah. Oh. You go into this country that's had issues with gangs and stuff before, and Alan, had invited you to go into the prisons and stuff. And I've actually been with you with the youth prison before and met some of those guys, and a couple of them remember me when I went back, which was really cool. I don't know that I'm that memorable, but probably the camera. They let me take the camera in. Maybe that's what it was, but it's cool to just build those relationships and stuff. And we went to another Christian prison at the time and spoke to thousands of people at once, which was like talking to an army, which is wild. But you also, I want to talk about what led you to begin this other facility. I don't want to take away your story of this, but for a lot of these guys, if they can get out of prison, they go right back into the gangs and either do all the things gangs do and either wind up dead or back in prison again. So how did this next project that you kind of started, I don't know if it's your most recent big one, maybe, I guess.
Yeah.
What did God put on your heart was there a story or a certain thing that happened that you said, hey, we need to step in here and do this?
Well, the Living Free program started out of going into the prisons. And we have to come back and talk about the prisons as well, because going into the adult prisons, we've had hundreds and hundreds, if not thousands, of people saved in the last 2 years. It's just been...
Yeah, tell us about the process. Don't let me leave something out.
No, but that's good. When Alan started going to the prison, and then he told me we really need to do something, I started going with him and visiting, and we were talking, well, what do we do? Because if these young men do get out, they're going to go right back into the gangs. It's just a vicious cycle. And the next time they get caught, they're going into the adult prison for 20 years or whatever. Mm. And so we talked about starting something, maybe a halfway house. And we met with the government at that time. There's was a particular area of government that focused on the youth prisons and the youth. So we talked to them, what could we start a rehabilitation center for them? And they would come, and we're basing it off a Teen Challenge, which is a well-known rehab center in the States and overseas. And so to do that, they gave us their approval. There was nothing in writing. If you guys do it, we'll support you and we'll send the young men to you. Well, we started the construction on that. The Lord miraculously provided 5 acres for us to build. And so we started the building. The pandemic hit, and it was like, the finances were tight. Everything with the teams couldn't come. And so it took us almost 2 years to build the thing. And a lot of things changed in the youth system and the prison system during the pandemic. They let a lot of people out of prison because they're afraid that they're going to be killed due to the COVID and everything. And so when we finally got it done and we dedicated it, it's been over 2.5 years ago, they gave us 5 guys to start out with. We were originally looking at 20 or 25, and maybe it's good we started out with 5. And Cesar and Juan Carlos, Osvaldo, Kevin, and Fabio. And so within the first week, 3 of them accepted Christ when they came, because that was not a prerequisite to come into the program. You can't do that. You have to see as a long term.
Yeah.
And so God's really done a work in their lives. And then we've had probably more than 60 that have come through there at one point or another through the Living Free program. It's an internal program. It's not high security. If they want to walk out the gate, they can, although there'd be an order for capture from the police for them, and they'll probably get captured. They go to the adult prison. But they get discipled by the Teen Challenge curriculum. They get good food. It's spacious. They have dorms. They have classrooms. They have chapel every day. They have devotions every day. They receive the Bible every day. And there's a number of them that haven't accepted Christ yet. Yet that it's almost like I see it as almost like a religious culture or like the Muslim culture or Buddhist culture or Hindu culture. It takes a long time to get through to them. They've seen the churches, the evangelical churches. Mm-hmm. Many of them might have grown up in it. But the gang, when they sign on for the gang, it's for life. And so to become a Christian means you're turning your back on the gang.
Yeah.
And so that's a very hard step to take, because what will happen to me? What will happen to my family? Do I want to make that step? Can God care for me like the gang can care for me? You know, all those, a lot of questions. But God has given us success. I have a number of friends that are police. They're involved in the government, and they told me when I was building the program and I was talking to different ones and casting the vision and talking about prophetically about what we're going to do, they said, you're making a big mistake and you're putting your life in danger. No one, not even God, can transform these guys.
Wow.
And I told them nothing's impossible for God.
Yeah.
Luke 1:37, and God has transformed their lives. We on Sunday we received 10 new members in our church. We baptized 7. 2 people got saved. Out of the 7 that we baptized, 2 of them were from the Living Free program, and so they've made that public proclamation. I'm a Christian. I'm different, and we do it outside. Anybody can see it. Anybody can report it back to the gang or who's ever left. And you know what? But they're doing it. And so the Living Free program has been successful. The U.S. Embassy has given us this year a brand new van and a brand new pickup because they believe in the program.
Oh.
We have job training. We're training them in the bakery and T-shirt stamping and stamping cups and all of that type of thing. We have agriculture programs where we grow different types of vegetables and sell them. We have an egg production. We're producing over 500 eggs a day. It's based on the price here in the United States. I wish I could ship them up and sell. Yeah. We have a tilapia farm as well. And so they learn carpentry. There's different things that they learn that will train them for jobs when they get out. And it's a 2-year program. And so they go to church twice a week on Friday and on Sunday. They're in the service, and this is whether they're Christians or not, they're there. Our church has accepted them. Our church loves them. They're part of our family. We love them. When I go to Living Free, which is almost every day, I go and I give them a hug, and I let them know that they're loved by God and loved by us.
Yeah, one of my favorite pictures of you, and you showed it last night when we were sharing, is one of those guys at the program just hugging you, and you can almost see, like, even in the schools or anywhere else, when you guys show up, the people's faces light up and they're just happy to see you, and they know that it's like a ball of love coming to them, like something that they've been missing. And I can almost see like you being almost like a father figure or something to some of them, like someone who's they can trust and has their best interests at heart, and like a lot of them never had that. That's pretty wild when we have that issue here in the States as well with some things, but it's just so prevalent in the gang issue.
It is, Brandon, and so many families are fatherless families. And so I remember one time we did a Father's Day thing in the youth prison, and there's like 100 guys there, and I asked them, how many of you did not grow up with a dad? And I think it was like 60% did not grow up with a dad. How many of you had a dad that abused you or that mistreated you? And then there's another group. So to have a really healthy family is very few,
Yeah.
minuscule. I had them write out on a piece of paper, what would you like to say to your dad if you could say something to him? And I have those at my house. And I read through all of them. They said, Dad, I love you. Sorry I never knew you, but I still love you. And I mean, messages from the heart. It was really impressive. And others, I don't understand why you never loved me and, didn't want me or that type of thing. Just tears at your heart.
Yeah.
But we do become a father figure. And those guys in the prison or out of the prison have been so respectful to my wife, to ladies that have gone in there with us. You think that they're going to be disrespectful or say, no, they really respect people that are coming to help them. And one of the young men at Living Free, he told me, said, I know you really love me. And doesn't get much better than that.
Yeah.
So, and part of that is, missions is not about proclamation. Missions is not about just going. Missions is not about building a ministry. Missions is about loving. And if we sow love, we're going to reap love. And when we do that, God's going to grow the ministries. We don't have to worry about it as much.
Yeah, for sure.
And I'll segue into what we've started this year as well. We started another program called Living Free Family, because as we went into the adult prisons, we saw the tremendous need. They're worried about their families outside of the prison. Who's taking care of them? Who's providing for them? And we have had a great opportunity in the adult prisons over the last year and a half to go in and to preach the gospel, to say to these ladies and these men, we love you, and we're waiting for you. When you get out, you can come to our church. We'll help you. We'll get you a start. We'll try to get you a job. We'll provide clothing or food or whatever you need for your family. And this has been just a tremendous thing. In May, the end of May or first part of June, we did a Mother's Day outreach at the prison, women's prison in our town. And in 5.5 hours, we preached 12,000 ladies, just going sector to sector. And we took a small bottle of pop and a sweetbread to each one. We got permission to do that. Had 135 ladies accept Christ. And those are the ones we could count, because many times with like a long thing like your studio here, and you're up here in front and you can only see those that are here, and those that are in back, you can't reach them or touch them.
Yeah.
And but God has done wonderful things through that. And we've seen hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people that accepted Christ there and in the youth prisons as well. God's just given us tremendous favor. And so we've been reaching out to the family members. They can come to the church. We can help them with food packets, with legal advice, with psychologists is there to a Christian psychologist to speak to them, and then spiritual hope as well.
That's cool too for them, because when you're there telling them like what's probably their darkest moment, and society as a whole kind of marks them as like, oh, you've been in prison in the gang, and they don't know if they'll ever be like truly accepted back into real life or loved unconditionally or whatever. And so you're coming before they're even out and saying, we already love you and we're waiting for you and we're going to help your family and stuff. That's got to mean a lot to them.
Well, and many of them, they have tattoos as well. And so that's against them. And then also businesses, when they hire anybody, they ask you to do a police record check, just like they do here in the States. They're more as a drug check, but police record check, and it comes out that they've been in prison. No one wants a lot of a prisoner right there, and so it's really hard. So we can become also a reference for them. We know them, we've met them in prison, and yes, would you give them a chance?
You've seen them train and do real life skills and jobs like at the facility. And another cool story, and I don't remember all the context of why it happened, but I was there with you one time, and was it the first Living Free graduation? I can't remember. You're already doing a training or class or something, and they were going to graduate. And for some reason, they didn't do it in the prison. They brought the prison basically to the church, which was a very interesting, I don't know, I've definitely never seen it before. You might explain what happened there, but so just the basic of what I remember is, we were having this graduation, and also the moms and dads and people that family members that want to come see them, their kids or family graduate from this program. So they came to the church, but because there were so many prisoners, it was like they made the church compound like a temporary prison. So like they had guards at the gates and guys with guns, and like it was very interesting.
Manacled by their feet and
walking in, handcuffed and
from the highway there. I mean, down into our campus.
Yeah,
and that was our first graduation of our 12 steps towards freedom.
Okay,
and out of the prison, and they allowed us to do it there. We've done that twice now, and it was really neat to be able to do that because these guys they didn't get to go out of the prison. And one of my favorite photos is the photo you took of all the handcuffs hanging on the stairwell. The stairwell, and we changed them into some robes and everything for their graduation. And one of them, his name is Jose. He had his face was all tattooed up here except for 666 across the front. And he actually came into our program, lasted a week because he also worshipped the saint of the Holy Dead called La Santa Muerte, which is a demonic being. And he said, it doesn't go together. And he said, I can't stay here because I'm loyal to my worship of this demon. And and so we prayed over him. We tried to get him to stay, and he left. And we saw almost after that, the government picked him up, and they found him with actually an altar towards this demon and everything. And he's in prison. He'll be there for 20 or 30 years, unfortunately. But while he was there, I mean, we had just a short amount of time. At least we sowed into him, and I pray for him all the time.
Yeah,
that God's going to touch his life. That God's given us tremendous favor with the government because all of the other programs that are like halfway houses, not for youth because we're focused on youth, prisoners that went in as youth. And so there's others that focus on men coming out of prison and giving them a place to stay until they can learn some job skills. All of those are closed. All of those men have been taken back to prison, and they're there. El Salvador has the highest incarceration rate per capita of any place in the world, any country in the world. And so it's sad. At the same time, maybe something drastic like this needed to happen to provide.
Try to break a cycle.
Yeah. And they have broken that cycle. And so, we don't speak against the government or anything, but we see both sides, the need and everything. But we really believe God placed us there at a crucial time, and to help these young men and also to be involved in the prisons.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, you're one of the few people that I can say have been more places than me with all the stuff you've done. So, like, what are some of the coolest adventures you've had, or things you've done, or things you've eaten that I don't know, just some crazy.
Okay.
I know you got some stories to tell on travel in the world and doing the unexpected.
I'll start with El Salvador.
Okay.
When we were working in the squatter camp, one of the young men, it was his 15th birthday, which is a big birthday for them. Mm-hmm. And so he invited me over to eat at his house. And so I went, and it was getting dark. And so they'd set up a table outside, a wooden table outside his little wooden house. And so they'd made tamales, and I love tamales. And so we're sitting there, and it was so dark I could hardly see that, like a candle on the table. And so I put a big bite of tamale in my mouth, and I felt something hard in there. And so I'm rolling around on my tongue. What is this? And immediately I knew what it was a chicken head.
Oh.
And so they put the whole chicken head in there and everything. And I'm thinking, what am I going to do?
Yeah, you do.
I'm not going to eat this chicken head.
How'd you casually spit out a chicken head?
I'm sure it was flavored. And so, you always do the old, like that. Got it in my hand and looked down, and there was his dog underneath the table.
I'll take it.
Praise
God.
Yeah. So he ate the chicken.
He ate a way out, right?
And so, and I've been in other situations where there's chicken feet. you know, and I'm just thinking, you know, there's not a lot of meat on chicken feet, you know.
Yeah.
So, but that was one. I know you've traveled to China as well. And when I was there, we were in one of the smaller towns, because 1.5 million.
Yeah,
the
small little village.
Yeah, little villages. And so the leaders of the village there, the mayor and different officials, political officials, invite us to eat. And so they brought these plates to us that had like these rice noodles fried, like made a mountain. And they had fried scorpions mounted on those, going up there with the tail curving up. I don't know how they did that, you know, and everything. And I said, I'm not going to pass up a chance to eat fried scorpion. So I ate two. And to eat the tail, you're just thinking, you know, it's all the poison's fried out. But you're just thinking, but it was just crunchy. They really had no flavor or anything like that. But that's
so you ate one and then you thought, I'll have another.
Yeah, why not?
Yeah,
you know,
there's plenty. You're like, eat more.
Because anyone can eat just one.
Yeah. I don't think so. I don't think I could.
That, you know, they had turtle that had like this shell cracked with a hammer, and they had those there. I ate a little bit of that, but that's probably the most interesting thing.
I always think of the Indiana Jones scene where they go in and they take the monkey head off, and it's like gut brains.
Yeah,
that's what I feel like every time. It doesn't even have to be that extreme, but in my brain, because I'm world renowned as a picky eater. But so yeah, my go-to move is to say I'm allergic to things, and people give me a little more grace usually. But
well, one time we were out in northern Uganda, and we're out in the refugee camps that were from the southern Sudan area, and there had been war there, and you know, guerrilla warfare and that type of thing. And so I spoke out under a little mango tree, and so they wanted to give us lunch. I'm thinking, man, God, what are we going to eat out here?
Yeah.
There's those typical round mud huts, and with the straw or the twig cone leaves and roofs and everything. And they took us in, and they had white rice and pinto beans. I'm saying,
I can eat that all day. Yeah,
that all day. Yeah. That's what I'm used to.
Oh my gosh.
But you know, I'll tell you 2 or 3 experiences from my travel. I went to Indonesia, and in Surabaya, Indonesia, we worked with a lady there. She was actually a millionaire and had dedicated her money to help the poor. And so she worked with the garbage collectors, and they would collect the garbage, and they would bring it to their small homes or their compounds and sort through that. Well, in Surabaya, the garbage is toilet paper. It's all of it, and they would sort through that and pick out anything, and that's how they made their money.
Yeah, well, people don't know, if you're watching this and never left the States, in a lot of countries, probably more than not, you can't put toilet paper down the toilet.
We're El Salvador is the same way.
Yeah, so that used toilet paper goes in the trash. So that's when we talk about going through garbage. It's not like going through American garbage, even.
Yeah, and it's not with gloves and boots and things like that. You know, and we went to one of the guys' houses that was sorting the garbage, and all this garbage around his little tiny cramped house, like just a place for him to sleep. And then we went. They had like a meeting of the garbage collectors, and as they started the service, they sang a song that they had wrote, and they said, "I was a piece of garbage, and God recycled me."
Wow.
Never forgotten that song. Never forgotten them singing that song. And I thought, you know, that's what I am. I and you, Brandon, we all are. We're pieces of garbage that God saw value in, that recycled us. And I'm so thankful that God would use me in El Salvador. I'm not the most qualified or anything. You know, other people could have done it much better. Hispanics could have gone and done the language better, but God saw something in me that he wanted to use, and so he did. But I'm so glad God recycled me.
You know, he saw your yes, like you said earlier. You know, that's what we're all responsible for.
I had an experience after the tsunami in the Maldives Islands, and the Maldives is one of the most closed countries in the world. and you cannot share the gospel openly. There's not churches there. It's a very
they just want tourists, right?
Yeah, just tourists.
Come to the beach.
And so when the tsunami happened, we went to Sri Lanka, and we met with some leaders from our mission, and they said, "Man, we sure wish we could go to Maldives, because the tsunami waves had passed over the island like at 5 or 6 feet high. So there's a lot of damage done there." I said, "Well, why don't we?" I said, I was working for Commonwealth Hope, we're an NGO. We can go to these places, disaster relief. And so we made contact with the people there in Maldives, with the government. We said, we'd like to do a visit disaster response and see how we can help. And so we did. We flew over. And so they're telling me that, you're not from this area of the world, and just want to let you know we don't say anything about God there. If not, they're going to throw us out on our ear. And don't talk to anybody about Jesus, nothing. I mean, we got to be really, really closed on this. And so we went and met with the government officials. They said, "You know what? What we need is a bobcat. We need somebody here. If you could give us 6 months." And so we arranged that, and we actually sent Christians in there for 6 months who were working and were able to make a difference there. But while we were on a shuttle boat between the islands, as it got on, it was pretty full. And so the missionaries that were with me, they sat in some seats there, and I sat up here and by myself, and there's a seat next to me, and a young man, maybe about 18 or 20, came and he sat down beside me. And he looked at me. He's obviously, I'm not from there. And so he asked me, "Where are you from?" And I told him I was from the United States. And his first question out of his mouth was, "Do you believe in miracles?" And so,
is this the trap?
What do I say?
Yeah.
They told me not to say anything.
Yeah.
"God, I really feel like you brought me here.
Yeah.
And this is ordained by you."
Yeah.
And so I said, "Yes, I do." "Well, how do you know a miracle?" I said, "Well, I know because God's done a miracle in my life. He's done healing. God has." And so I began to share with him how I'd had asthma as a young child and how I suffered from that. My mom had to prop me up in bed with a chair and hang wet sheets in my room and give me Primatene mist and all those kind of things just to keep me breathing at night, and how one day God had miraculously healed me. And I even ran a hay crew for 2 years after that, in the dust in the barn and everything, without any difficulties. And then I'd had 2 ruptured discs in my back from picking up something I shouldn't have picked up, and how I had pain in sciatica and couldn't hold my children, and how God had healed me of that. Just one morning I woke up and it was completely gone. And, I just had a chance to share that. And I said, I know God is real because he's done these miracles and because he lives in my heart. The boat ride was over. I never saw the young man again. They didn't throw me out of my ear. We were leaving anyway the next day. But God allowed me that opportunity, and it shows me even in the darkest of places, even in the place where the door's closed, God can open it.
Yeah. And it sounds like from his perspective, he was already thinking about it, and maybe somebody else had planted a seed in his mind or heart, and you were there to water it, like the next step, Yeah.
I'll share one other country. I, as a missionary, I have my heroes.
Yeah.
And I mean, there's people that are doing an amazing job. One is John Carlock, who's had a school in Gaza for many years. And I've been to that school and I've seen what God's doing through them. And now to see what's going on in Gaza, to see everything destroyed, it really brings pain to my heart. And because these children are not responsible for what happened in Israel. Mm-hmm. But he's one of my heroes. But I have another hero in Uzbekistan, and they're Mike and Cindy Edson. And when they went there, Mike was involved initially in the church and then Bible school and stuff like that. And his wife was sort of looking for something to do. And so some of the ladies from the embassy or like the international circle invited her to go to an orphanage. And it was an orphanage for special needs children. And they were going down a walk, and she was sort of distracted looking at the plants and looking at a building. And she saw a building there that had all the windows broken out and looked like no one lived there. And she walked over towards it, and somebody grabbed her hand and led her inside, and she saw to her horror the special needs children. I mean, people with extended heads, like the elephant back, all of these souls that they were in a room in their own excrement in the cold with someone without any clothes on, and she went out, and she went back the next week and asked specifically if she could go over to that building, and she took a little bag of sweetbread with her cookies, and she went back to that same room, and when she opened the door, they saw that she had something in there, and they grabbed that bag from her out of her hands and just attacked it. And it fell in the excrement on the floor, and they were eating those cookies, and she didn't know what to do. So she asked what can I help? And they said, why would you want to help these? These are worse than animals. No one loves them here. And there was an orphanage with special needs kids there. And so long story short, she started to go back, and she would clean up one child and as she could and give it some clothing, and they would go back the next week, and she'd go every week. And sometimes she'd go back and that child was dead, the one that she had helped the week prior. And over a period of time, the ladies that worked there were so insulting and so mean and would beat the kids, but she finally won one to Christ. And she got one room clothed and changed, and she was able to transform that orphanage into a model orphanage for the whole country.
Wow. They're
still there. They're still working. And God has used that to influence government officials. And she is one of my heroes.
Yeah. It's amazing.
I went to Uzbekistan, and I went into that orphanage, and I saw these kids confined to their beds, many of them that couldn't move or that could barely move an arm or a leg or whatever. And I watched as she walked in. To me, she was as close as Jesus as anybody could be, because I saw those children that looked at her with eyes of affection and with love, and those that couldn't move just watched her, and they would move their eyes and follow her till they couldn't see her anymore. Those that could move something reached their hand out to her, and she'd reach out and just touch them and love them. And that really impressed me. That's who I wanted to model my ministry after, to love anybody who needs help. And next month, we're going to have our first Christmas outreach for special needs children at our church.
Wow.
And I met a guy named he's Pastor Craig from Joel Osteen's church, Lakewood in Houston. And they have what they call Champions Club, and they do special needs outreaches. And so we're doing that. He's actually coming down, and so we've gone to the special needs school there in Santa Ana. We're inviting all of them to come. We're giving away toys and providing refreshments for them and their families. And so I look back and I say, you know what? Cindy Edson influenced me to do this. It's taken a few years to make it come to pass, but she's one of my heroes, and I'm so thankful for her.
Well, and I see that. I told people last night at the church, when people see you at the school or in the prison or wherever, just like their faces light up, and they don't have the mobility issues, but the same kind of thing, like, oh, the Moody's are here, oh, like, oh, they're there, oh, hey, say hi, reach out, So that's a definite blessing, but just an honor to you guys that you see that and wanted that for your ministry, and I'm here telling you that's what I've seen in your ministry, and part of the reason I love working with you guys, and I'll always come back to El Salvador, and will be one of your biggest advocates, I hope, to anybody that I come across, because you guys are doing an amazing job, and we can see your heart and the impact you're making on that country for Jesus.
Well, we love it, and I'm also fortunate to go to a country where you can eat pupusas. So,
oh, yes, yes.
We had them last night.
I know. I had one too many for sure. I started sweating. I ate so many of them. They're very good.
I got to tell you a humorous story, because I love the language, and I try to speak Spanish as best as I can. I've not always been up there, and so we had a church team from the Lone Star Cowboy Church in Montgomery, Texas, that came down. They've been wonderful people to us, and so we were building our church building where we're out now, and one of those guys, his name is Tommy Middleton. He had lost part of his leg. I'm not sure if it's from the knee down or what, but he had a prosthetic leg. And so he was working really hard. He was up on the top of the building welding and using the screw gun and everything. And so I was trying to honor him. And, at church service, I said, people, these guys that come down here and, prostrate and prosthetic is like a one letter or syllable difference.
Yeah.
And I said, even though Tommy has a prostrate, he's up there on that building and he's doing, and as soon as I said that, the people just broke out. I mean, they couldn't hold it. They were laughing, and I'm saying, what did I say? And my wife said, you're saying prostrate, not prosthetic. And so, there's things like that keep us humble.
Yeah.
And so I'm not perfect in the language. We're not the best missionaries and not the best preachers. I'm not the best organizer or the best fundraiser either, that's for sure. But you know what? I can be the best at loving.
Yeah.
And if I can do that well, all the other things will fall into place. So, and we so appreciate you, Brandon and Kristen and Hope as a family and your desire to reach out to others. And, I really recommend any missionaries that hear this as well to invite you and to go, because one of the things I saw through your ministry is that you're looking through your lens, but you're also looking through the lens of others here in the United States that need to hear and to see, and you're able to grab the story and adequately tell it. And sometimes it's not words, sometimes it's just a photo, sometimes it's just seeing somebody that moves you. And we need mission field media because you're able to do that. I'm not able to do that. My focus is on helping the people.
Yeah.
Your focus is on telling the story and working together. We can make a big difference.
Absolutely. Well, thanks for coming on and making time to be on the show. And I know you probably especially have so many more stories, but I plan to be back to El Salvador so we can shoot one live there too. And we'll get to tell more of those stories in the future.
And, the stories are always wrapped in people.
Absolutely.
And so God does wonderful things, and we're just thankful that he uses us and as part of that.
Yeah. And what, this podcast and what I do with Missionary Field Media is encourage people to go make your own story, live your own story.
That's right.
So don't just hear these stories and be happy about them, but, go live through your own, right? Whether your workplace or your church or your neighbors, or go to El Salvador, wherever God leads you, and have an adventure for Jesus. They're definitely there.
Yep.
So,
well, I'm glad to be here today.
Awesome.
Thank you for letting us stay at your house. I mean, you've been a big blessing to us here, being here for this time with my son's wedding and everything. It's a big blessing.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks again for joining us on the Mission Field Media podcast. We so appreciate you taking the time to watch and listen to what God is doing all around the world through all these missionaries and ministries. Please remember to subscribe to the channel and find us on the social media apps and follow us there as well. Tell all your friends about it. We couldn't do any of this without the listeners like yourself and our sponsors. Thank you so much, and we look forward to having you join us again on the Mission Field Media podcast.